Overtime again here at Old Favorite Friday. I am Kevin Abbott. I am one of the owners and director of operations of Barrel of Monks Brewing. Ralph Renault, one of our brewers here, talking about Ayinger Celebrator Doppelbock, a beer that I love. You know, every week I go around the brewery and I ask Ralph, I ask Joel, I say, hey, who wants to talk about this beer with me this week? And every week, no matter what beer style I mention or what beer I mention, Ralph, you're like, oh, I love that beer. I love that style. All I want to do is talk about that. And once again, you jumped in and said, Ayinger Celebrator Doppelbock.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Pick some good styles. So if anyone watching this who hasn't had Celebrator and is trying to get new classic German styles, you have to have this beer. Because part of the reason I did jump at the chance is when I was first transitioning from like only thinking European beers good to craft beer, I went through a Bock phase with me and some of my friends, and this is like one of the quintessential Doppelbocks. It is, when people think of Doppelbock, there's a couple names like this, Corbinian, but like if you're going classic 2 style, one of the best still out there, this is it. They are an old school name who've been doing it for a really long time, and they do it really well, that I still love drinking this now. So.
Well, it's one of kind of the cheats of doing this series is that many people out there are reviewing beers, and they're reviewing new beers, old beers, what have you, but they're reviewing them, you know, kind of scattershot. Mm-hmm. We're specifically picking some of the best beers in the world and beers that are the leaders of that style, the quintessential pick of that style, and we get to talk about those. So we do love them, right?
Yeah.
We do really enjoy them, and there's usually very little bad to say about them because they are so absolutely incredible. We've been talking a lot in the last few weeks about brown beer for whatever reason. This one was actually recommended to us, so they just kind of luck of the draw, so to speak. But this is another incredible dark brown beer, dry, really clean, because it's a lager, but with all this roast character, this fruit, this dark fruit flavor, this toffee, this caramel. I mean, the complexity in a beer that's not 12% alcohol, doesn't have a ton of residual sugar. I mean, this beer is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and it honestly, it shows, because you pretty much nailed it, where it shows what you can do with malts when you have a very specific idea in mind. Because like you said, it's lager yeast, so that's not going to add a whole lot to it because it's meant to be clean, it's meant to be drinkable, even at its strength. But the way they've layered the malts, like you get that right up front. I get like almost a raisin, like a rum raisinette, but at the back end, it's something you mentioned on it, there's just like a touch of roast. Where if you've had, especially a lot of Bocks, you know, they have their variants with anything else. It's nice with this beer particularly, you get all that sweetness up front and you're like, oh, I didn't necessarily expect that roast, but it just completes the beer. It adds more complexity to it.
I do honestly believe that if you are a craft beer fan, if you are, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, obviously. I'm going from I really believe this to now saying it's a little tongue-in-cheek. Follow me. If you are out there reviewing beers on, you know, the different platforms, things of that nature, I think you should be forced to drink a beer like this. I think you should be forced to drink through some of these Old Favorite Friday beers and really understand the basis of all these styles. These beers, so many of the new beers, they're takeoffs on classic IPAs or classic brown ales or stouts. And without an understanding of where these beers come from and what that pure style tastes like, can you really judge the beers that are coming out now? I mean, this really is like, it's like the 101 education of craft beer and its complexity and its deliciousness.
Yeah, and you're so right, because I actually have friends who do some reviewing on YouTubes and this and that, and they'll actually say people want to send you, like they want to send you the hazy IPA or the pastry stout, but when they are going and they'll get beers themselves, they'll buy something more similar to this because this is what they really want to drink, and they get, you know, sent so much of the other stuff, and it's nice for them, but they're like, when they're just hanging out at home or something, they're gonna be drinking a beer like this, not necessarily these new hype styles all the time.
Well, the thing that we're always looking for on social media, and obviously we're on a social media platform right now, is that it's what's new, it's what's hot. But if you get together with a bunch of brewers at a beer fest, and we're going to be at one in a week or so, Ralph,
Yep.
You're coming with me, I believe.
Yep.
Everyone's going to be talking about lagers, pilsners, everyone's going to be talking about brown ales, someone is going to bring up how much they love an ESB. brewers, the people that are really in the industry, love this stuff with a passion undying, but it's not as fun to talk about because it's not the brand new thing. And it really is a shame. And I really love breweries that are taking these styles, reimagining them, trying to get that back to the roots and add their own flair, add their own complexity, because that's what we do, right? We're not just trying to copy something. But this really is a beer that should open up new doors for you when you try it because of its complexity, because as it opens up, as it gets a little bit warmer, it changes, and you get more out of it. Incredible food beer. I mean, the amount of things that you could pair with something like this is amazing. And I love talking about these styles because I feel like there's not enough of that out there, of just really praising this and going back to the roots and saying how great these beers are, and still are.
Yeah, and I'll say I'm probably going to be in at least a few more of these videos because a lot of what you've been picking, and that's what relates to with me, is it reminds me of like when I first got into beer and I just wanted to try everything. Some of the stuff we've done, especially recently, even with like the Double last week, those are beers that at one point, I remember when it used to be like Beer Advocate, and that was a big thing. I would sit there through ratings and what people wrote and try and find like all these beers, because that was back when even like West Veletrin was the king of beers and all that. And so like these are the beers that take me back to really getting into beer.
I'm scared to check the Untappd ratings of this beer, because if this doesn't have at least a 4, I don't want to be in this business anymore. Because this, if any beer deserves a 4, it's a beer like this. But because it's considered commonplace by so many people, I would not be surprised if that's not the case. And just a shame. Just a shame. If you're watching this and you haven't had this beer in a while, please find it. You're going to have to go to a specialty store for the most part to pick it up, but it's available all throughout the country. And, you know, just revisit it. Try these beers. Look at the other beers similar to that on the shelf and try those as well. Because especially if your palate has evolved over time, you try this for the first time when in your infancy in craft beer, you're going to appreciate it in a whole different level 10, 15 years in and see something that's this special, this good, and this consistent. Guys, if you have any suggestions for Old Favorite Friday, you can put them in the comments here. And please click around. We got tons of other videos talking about beers just like this right here on the channel that you can sit and see if you agree with our very biased view of some of the best beers of all time. Cheers. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.